Hello, I am your proud superintendent, Dr. Leslie Torres Rodriguez. I am leading the crucial process of reimagining and restructuring our school district. I need you, all of you, to be significant partners in our process. We are doing this imperative work to deliver on our commitment to ensure improved student outcomes and equitable access to resources for each and every one of our beautiful and capable students. When we have completed this process together, we will hold in our hands a stronger, more equitable school district designed to serve all students well, a plan built by the entire community that will benefit the entire community. We at Hartford Public Schools are coordinating the process, but you, the community, families, students, teachers, and all of our stakeholders are the voices and the minds that must inform this work. By sharing your thoughts, you will help to co-create our district model. Our work together, which takes place over the coming months in community meetings with families, partners, and schools, will culminate in the presentation of recommendations for district models for excellence, different ways in which the district can be reimagined while ensuring the health and viability of our neighborhoods, and continuing to provide access to opportunities and services for our families and students. For news about meetings and ongoing updates on our process, please visit our district website at www.hartfordschools.org.
Good evening. You're all so far away. You're okay like that? Okay. Okay. So I know that we are also going to have some board members joining us, but I'm just going to continue with the presentation. So I am Dr. Leslie Torres Rodriguez. I am your superintendent, and I welcome you to our second community conversation. And I'm just going to talk about the overview of how we're going to have the conversation, and then we'll get right to business. I also want to acknowledge that we have some board members that are already here, so I'm just going to ask you to kind of wave. So we have Julio Flores here in the front. Juan Hernandez is in the back. And I don't think we have any others here. So welcome, and thank you for joining us as well. What I have for you tonight is just an overview of the presentation that I have already made, my recommendations to the board, and also a lot of the frequently asked questions. These are the questions that keep coming up over and over and over again. And then, of course, time for us to have some dialogue. I know that I also have here members of my senior staff as well, representatives from transportation, from our English language learning department, you name it, they're here, because I know some of the questions that come up are specific as well. So we also actually have Costas Diamantes here from State Department of Administrative Services and the Office of School and Construction as well, who's been very active throughout this process from a facility perspective. So I welcome you all, and I will begin. If there is a time during the presentation that there's a specific question that relates to what I'm speaking about, feel free to stop me, and if you have a question, I'll certainly answer it. If anyone needs translation, si alguien necesita que le traduzcan, tenemos a María disponible. Okay. So I'm going to begin by just reminding all of us the reason why, right? The reason why we're doing this work. And as you perhaps already might have heard me talk about, the fact that we in Hartford Public Schools have a very unique challenge that is not new. The challenge that we have goes back years and years and years. And we needed a plan, a recommendation for the board that addresses a lot of these challenges. One is the fact that we have deep student needs. We know that in Hartford Public Schools, we need to develop a network. What I mean when I say network is the entire school system, all of the schools that we have. We have to have a network that meets the needs of all of our students. As part of these recommendations, one of the things that we had to do per board policy before we can recommend any school to close is we had to do a comprehensive study. That is a study that looked at who is it that we serve in our district, what are the needs of our students, what's the enrollment, what are the conditions of the facilities, what are we spending our money on, how are we using our resources. Our teachers are resources, our facilities are resources, the programs, the books, all of that, right? That's part of this process. And so one of the things that we learned is that when we compare ourselves to the entire state, especially when we compare ourselves to places like New Haven, Waterbury, Bridgeport, right? Those are the urban centers, the other urban districts that have about the same number of students that we do. Hartford happens to have among the highest in terms of students with special needs, so our special education students. We also have the highest in terms of our English learners, which, by the way, now that percentage is higher given that we have welcomed, right, many students from that have been displaced and are coming from Puerto Rico. And we also happen to have the highest number of facilities that are not being used fully. And so when you put all of that together, you also look at how are our students doing academically, right? Remember, at the end of the day, our number one job as a school system is to make sure that our students are performing at high levels so that when they leave us, right, they are prepared either for college or career. And our data shows us that over the years, our students are not performing high and they're just consistently performing at a lower level. That's a challenge for us. The other challenge is the declining enrollment, right? So you look back over the last 4 years, we have lost 15% of our students. 2,000 students in the last 4 years have left our district. And we know that every student has funding behind them, right? That's just the way the funding system works. And so when we lose students, we also lose funding. So you put all of those things together, deep student need, low student performance, declining enrollment, and then the other piece that I don't have here is our finances, right? We know the city and the state, very challenged in terms of finances. This is the 9th year that Hartford Public Schools has either gotten a reduction in funding or no funding at all, the same amount of funding. 9th year, either flat or reduced funding, while our needs continue to increase. So you think about that, right? We're having to do more with less. We cannot continue that way because we know that our number one goal is to make sure that our students perform at high levels. So that's the why. That's the reason why we now have this challenge to make these hard decisions in order to move forward. This is a slide that I think many of you have seen, and this is just the process that we are engaging in as part of the recommendations that I'm making. The green phase here was the input and the data gathering, and that happened in the fall, right? We met with many community folks. We met with the board, with staff. We required parents to give us feedback and recommendations so that I can present what I'm calling the non-negotiables, which informed the plan that I presented to the board. We are now part of the feedback phase. Oh, this doesn't work anymore. Where I presented the recommendations, and this is part of feedback. And the board, right? We have board members here because now the feedback actually goes to the board so that the board can make their informed decisions. In terms of what happens next, the board is scheduled to take a vote next week, and depending on how the vote goes, we will shift into strategic school design teams. All of the schools that may see change I want to make sure that we continue with the engagement and the collaborative process and making sure that not only staff, but the community is part of the design. We certainly have heard what the priorities were identified from our teachers, from our students, and from our parents. Just a slide that kind of captures what it is that we kept hearing over and over again when people told us that, you know, each school should look at a child individually to try to meet their needs. That was the voice of our teachers. Schools have to be assets and stabilizing forces for our students and for their families. And making sure that we tap into the potential that our students have. And for teachers, also, we heard the fact that teachers want to make sure that they're supported in their schools. So as a result of all the engagement that we did, everything that we have heard, we identified the principles, right? This is what's guiding the work moving forward as we develop a district and a model of excellence. So we kept hearing all of the groups. This is what was shared by all of the feedback from all of the groups. Great teaching and learning in every school. Not in some schools, not in only this school, not in only that, in all of our schools. Access to great teaching and learning. Great teaching and learning that meets the needs of special ed students, regular education students, English learners, students that may have, right, additional social and behavioral needs. We also heard safe and equitable access to great schools and pathways. Now I'm going to spend a little time on this one because it certainly was something for us that we weren't expecting. Yes, we expected everyone to say to us, we want safe schools. Safe schools in terms of facilities, safe schools in terms of welcoming schools, safe schools in places that students and teachers feel valued and supported. We expected that. What we didn't expect to hear was families talk about safety and security in terms of pathways. What we heard from parents is that they felt, particularly in our neighborhood schools, that they did not have access to a pathway for their children. They felt that if their child was in an elementary school, that they weren't sure what their pathway was in middle and high school. So they didn't feel that they had a safe bet in terms of what their child's trajectory and pathway was going to be in neighborhood schools. We also kept hearing expansion of family and community partnerships. One of the things that we found out during the comprehensive study is that we have a lot of resources, a lot of community-based organizations that are available in the city. But somehow, we kept hearing that we needed to expand that. And some of those conversations were with some parents when they were saying, we understand that schools have to close and we have to consolidate, but please remember that we don't want to lose our community-based supports and resources. And by the way, we think we need more, is what we kept hearing. And then the last principle is around our financial sustainability, fiscal sustainability. People said to us, you know, if we're going to do this, we have to do it right. And we have to do it in a way that is going to be such a solid plan that 2 years from now, we're not going to have another $26 million deficit, right? Because that was the last year's deficit, this year's, right? We went in and we had to mitigate $26 million. And for those of you that kind of follow, right, we still came up short $2 million. The year before, it was a $32 million deficit. So we know we cannot continue to survive that way. And people kept reminding us of that. Make sure that you create a model that we can be sure and go to bed at night, if you will, not worried about whether or not we're going to be able to afford our programs and doing the best for our students. So in addition to the priorities, we then developed the non-negotiables. This is what we're saying we have to see in all of our schools as a result of a model of excellence. This does not mean that it doesn't exist in some of our schools. We know that there's a lot of variance. And what I mean by variance is we know that there are a lot of different ways that schools are performing in terms of achievement, in terms of their culture and climate, in terms of their partnerships. It looks different in almost all of our schools. Some of our schools are doing really, really well. Others are not, right? So there's a lot of variance. What we need to do is make sure that we have greatness, right? Excellence in each one of our schools. And so we had to identify, these are going to be the non-negotiables. At the end of this model, this is what we want to see in all of our schools. We want to make sure that at the elementary level, we have a lot of intense supports for reading, writing, and math at the lower grades. We don't have that in all of our schools now. And I'll speak about why we don't have that in all of our schools. Middle grades, we don't have middle school programming, standalone middle school programming. We have schools that are pre-K-8, but those pre-K-8 schools, some of them have 40 students in a grade. And I'll explain what happens when we don't have full enrollment in schools and what that does to student performance and student learning and what that does for the adults. Because if you remember when I started my conversation, resources, people are resources. That's one of our most important resources, right? People, because they are here to actualize and deliver teaching and learning. So we want to invest in our people by providing supports, allowing them to get better every single day at what they do. But that costs money as well. And so with middle school programming, we don't have that. We're not able to provide that to our students. And so we know that middle schoolers are different. Those of you that have some at home, I had one at home, right? They're growing differently. They need a lot of different supports. So we're not able to provide that right now for our students. High school, college prep, and college career development. This, I got to give it to our students, actually. This is the #1 thing that our students kept highlighting for us. We want more access to college classes. We want more access to dual enrollment classes. And then, of course, we heard the health and wellness. We know that we don't have that available for our middle schoolers now. And we know that some of our high schools, right, there's a lot of sharing, a lot of split teaming that we have to do, a lot of cross collaboratives, and that's good. But with a plan that has a clear pathway, we'll be able to have our sports teams, right? And we know that those extracurricular and enrichment activities matter as well for our youth. With regard to practice, we want to make sure that every school is a community school. So my vision would be to be a district of community schools. What I mean by community schools, we have some already that exist in our district, is community schools are able to leverage the resources and the partnerships in the community. And so these are the schools that either have early programming, after school programming throughout the day. We have partners in the school at all times to help carry the school and support our students. We don't have that in all of our schools. And we just heard also, right, more partnerships, more resources. So that is a non-negotiable for us. Collaboration, we heard it from our teachers and our adults. We want to have time to learn from and with each other. And for those of us that know the research, we know that is very important for our adults to learn from each other. But we have to create the time for them to collaborate and learn and look at students and talk about their practice. We can't do that if we don't have people that are going to be with the kids, right, while they have time to work together and to get better at their practice. Because that also is a resource that we need. And you heard already, I spoke about partnership. In terms of the operation, that means how is it that we're going to work and do our work moving forward as a district? Capacity is something that we kept hearing. Making sure that we use our buildings to a fullest capacity. We know that some of our schools right now are filled 50%. And I don't know about, our guy here from the state in construction, right? So that means that we're being wasteful with our money. Because we still have to spend the same amount of money to keep the building open. We have to still pay all of the utilities. But if we're not using the building to full capacity, then that's not being efficient, right? We're not using our spaces to the best that we can. We heard pathways, making sure that we have the grade configuration, pre-K 5, middle school, and high school. I know that we are a school of choice, a district of choice. We have magnet schools, we have open choice. Those are options for our families. But if our families don't have those options available to them, for whatever reason, they didn't get the lottery, right? Whatever the reason, they changed their mind, they want to stay in their neighborhood. So we want to make sure that we have options for our families in their neighborhood schools that go from one grade to the other. So this is just our current district right now. And, you know, we have a little bit of everything. We have elementary schools that are pre-K, you know, pre-K 5, pre-K 8. We have a K-12, a little bit of everything in our district. And that makes it hard. It makes it hard for certainly us as a district to support our schools, but it also makes it hard, you know, for our families, harder for our families than it has to be. More than 80% of our neighborhood middle grades students are in a pre-K 8 setting right now. And if we look at the number of students, when we look at the entire district, the average in the pre-K to 5 grades, we have only 50 students per grade. So think of your second grade, right? 50 students only per grade. And then when we look at our middle grades, 44 students per grade. That makes it very, very hard for us to program for our students. This is an example, right? So right now, this is what our pre-K 8 school looks like, many of them. So these darker circles is one class. So this is one pre-K class. This is another pre-K class. We have schools that have only 2 classes per grade. That only affords us to have 3 elective teachers, right? Those are, for example, your music teacher, your art teacher, and maybe a PE teacher, physical education teacher, right? So we only have 3, and we have all of these classes. So you know that some of those students and some of those classes are not going to have an opportunity to have all of these 3 experiences. It's just not there. And we know that these are the teachers that help and give the academic teachers time to meet and collaborate and learn from and with each other. That's how we can do it, because we still have to supervise the kids, right? And so the only way that we do that is by having additional staff to cover the students. But we can't do that because we don't have enough of that. So the students suffer, right? Because we want to make sure that we have not just these teachers, not just the math and the art and the PE. We want tutors, right? We want a math coach because our teachers need to learn and get better at the Common Core, right? The Common Core is what students should know and be able to do, and they look different now, right? Because we have to make sure that we do rigorous instruction. That means that we teach our students how to think really, really well and really hard. We have to teach our teachers to do that. But it's hard for us to support that with only this. However, in a proposal, I'm saying that we could change our neighborhood schools from pre-K 8 to pre-K 5. Yes, that would require that we merge schools, consolidate, and close some schools. But look at what it would allow us to do. It would allow us to have more classes per grade, not more students per class. More classes per grade. I am not talking about more students per class. That's a very big difference. We have right now some schools that have 12 students in a class. We have schools that have 20 students in a class. And I know that it's easy for people to assume, well, of course, they're going to do better if there's less students in a class. The data does not show that that's true. Our data, Our student performance data does not support that. And by the way, when you look at the data and the research around class size, it's not the only thing that makes it. It's not just the class size. Other factors come into play. So it's not just that. So just to clarify, because I hear some people, saying, well, we're going to have classes of 30. No. First of all, there's a cap, right? So we're not doing that. What we're saying is more classes per grade so that we can have, right, a lot of additional staff here. Look at the difference, right? We go from 3 to 6. And at the middle school, we'll be able to do the same for our students. And so that gives us opportunities for teachers to work together, more electives for our students. We certainly can do more supports for our students, more clubs for our students. So the recommendation that I'm making is to have 4 standalone middle schools, 1 in every zone of the city. We don't have that now. We only have 1, which is McDonough. And because of all the other pre-K-8 schools, it's a very small enrollment in the current middle school that we have. So we would go from 44 students in a middle school to 128 students per grade. And we would also expand our pre-K-5 model also in all of our zones. And that takes us from 50 students in pre-K to 5 to 70 students as well. This is the same, let's see. 2 programs are recommended to be discontinued. Simpson, Waverly, and Batchelder as elementary, as pre-K-8 schools, right? And those students would then help with the pathway that we have, the pre-K-5 to 8 to 12th grade pathway. This is with regard to the high school, and we know now that there's limited access to high school in North Hartford, but that should change when we have Weaver, the Weaver campus coming up. So we're consolidating, of course, journalism and media and high school link into Weaver, and we have additional opportunities for our students in North Hartford, which then be fed, right? We will have the feeders from the 2 schools up north, which are Milner Middle School and also Martin Luther King Middle School. This is just an overview of what the pathways would be. Again, this is for our neighborhood schools. And so up top, right, Rawson and West Middle will feed into MLK Middle, Sand and Wish into Milner, which would ideally be a funnel for Weaver. Global will also potentially feed not only Weaver, but any of the other schools is an opportunity for global students. Asian Studies and Naylor feeding to Burr Middle School, and then all the others at the bottom, Byrne, Expeditionary Learning at Moylan, Parkville, Sanchez, into McDonough. So in terms of facilities, right, when I started the conversation, I talked about the fact that we have expenses from leases. We lease buildings, and we also have to incur the cost of the facilities that we also own. And so with my recommendation, there are potentially 12 facilities that could be freed, inclusive of central office. This dark one here, 960 Main, is our central office space. And that's an expense for us. We have 2 more years on that lease. But that's an $88,000 monthly rent for us at central office, not inclusive of parking that we also have to pay. So as soon as we can get out of that lease, we're gonna move out. And the recommendation that I have for the board is to move into Buckley High School. Buckley High School houses what, 3,000 capacity? 2,500 capacity, and we are well under. Maybe 700. So that's a hard one, right? And all the others, as you can see, Some of them are leases, and some of them we own them. When at the beginning of the presentation, one of the things that we kept hearing is, well, you have all these spaces and you're not using them, and you're not being smart with the resources that you use. And this model that I'm presenting, the recommendations, would take us from 68% use of our facilities to 82% of the seats being filled. And we also have the ranking, and I know that Kostas, maybe you can speak to the ranking and the facility quality. We have facilities that were ranked low meaning 4 or 5. 5 means that they should not, like Clark is a level 5, and a level 4 is that it would cost a significant amount of money to repair. And so in my recommendation, then we would go from 10 facilities that are level 4 or 5 to 4 buildings that are level 4 or 5. And that's one of the things that we heard, right? When we heard about safety, it's facilities that are, that are in good condition, because we know that matters. The other potential opportunity for us to reinvest resources in programs and students comes from staffing that we would have to move. And if you remember the other slide with the dark and the green circles, if we increase the number of students in our grades and in our schools, then of course we'd be able to use staff in a more strategic way, right? We'd be able to say, great, we can use additional English language teachers. We can use additional special education teachers, additional social workers for our students. And so combined, it would be an opportunity to reinvest $15 million a year after, the third year of this plan. And so, of course, these are some examples. I already talked to you about the non-negotiables that we want to have in every school, but know that we want to make sure that we have extended learning opportunities for our students. If we know that there's a school that needs conflict resolution, for example, I'm just identifying a school, and we know that the students need a lot of help with their social skills, then we know that we have to invest a specific amount of resources there, additional clinicians, perhaps social workers. These are the resources that we might be able to use for that type of work. These are the recommendations for our board over 3 years. I am not saying that this is work, that we should do over 1 year. And also, this plan, I know is easy, and we all want to kind of look at it in pieces. That's not the way this plan was developed. This plan was developed taking a lot of things into consideration. Number one is making sure that all of our students in all of the schools, right, have access to high quality opportunities. That's number one. Two, we have to think about, we have construction now. We have Martin Luther King, we have Weaver, right? All of those pieces fit into this plan. And so I can't say, well, right now, MLK, next year, there will be no more MLK pre-K-8. The kids that are in MLK now will never come back to that facility unless they come back as middle schoolers. But that has to wait for the construction to happen. So all of that is part of this plan. There are so many pieces that are connected in this plan that moving one piece away, right, will have an impact. Will have an impact to the pathways, will have an impact to how the students are going to move. So there's a lot of different elements that went into this plan. And so one of them is who we as a district are and our capacity to do this work. Hartford for a long time, and I know that, state, you probably can talk about it better than I. Hartford for a long time had a lot of, opportunities, and they took opportunities, right? Build schools, beautiful schools, right? And somehow they forgot, or whatever the reason, right? To say, okay, if we put 3 new schools, something's got to come off, because our enrollment was, right? Our enrollment is not increasing, wasn't increasing. But that didn't happen. And so now This is the time now, right? So years and years and years. This is the dilemma that we have in front of us now. And we know, I don't know if there's anyone here that can argue, right, that we can stay the way we are staying. Because if we say yes to that, then that means we're saying yes to some students having access more than others. And I cannot make recommendations for the board that allows for that. So we have closures that are recommended, recommendations for reconfigurations. But some of the schools that are not recommended by definition for closure will never be the same. Example is Milner, right? Milner is going to go to another facility. So in essence, it will be a reconfiguration. Right now, they're pre-K 8. My recommendation is for them to become a middle school, right, at another facility. That's why that is not being closed. But when you think about it, they're not going to ever be a pre-K 8 anymore. So when it comes to those, it's kind of technicality in how you define it per board policy. So we also have some closures and some relocations and some reconfigurations. There is a recommendation for a pre-K magnet in the south. We know that now we have pre-K magnet up north, and so we'd like to be equitable with that. That would require a co-location of a magnet at a neighborhood school, Burns. And still there are schools that would need to be in a home, right? We know that we have magnet schools. Look, magnet schools are part of our world. It's the reality that we have. And a reminder for all of us is that in the magnet schools are Hereford students, right? And while it's very easy to make this an us versus them, a magnet versus non-magnet, there are students. They are our students. And those are hard facts, right? That's the reality, and we have to look at that, and we have to think about how is it that we're going to do the right thing for all of our students. So I have a recommendation to co-locate magnets with neighborhood schools. This would get to the access to better quality facilities, access to sharing resources. And I know that, you know, some people might not like to share. That it's hard, right? But we have to figure this out. You know why? Right? Because our kids, at the end of the day, we have to figure out the strategy that is going to get us the best for our students. We have to figure out the strategy that is going to be the best opportunity to create conditions for our students to succeed. And so I'm proposing that we co-locate some schools. Right now we have the Weaver campus. That's a co-location of neighborhoods and a magnet. Breakthrough 2 and Martin Luther King. Hartford Pre-K Magnet and Global. Burns Latino Studies Elementary and Hartford Pre-K, right? One in the north, one in the south. Betances STEM and Burr. And so with this configuration and the plan and the recommendations, when we look at the number of magnet school students, we would go from 11,000 students, 11,000 magnet students that are in top ranked facilities to 13,000, right? So we would have an additional 2,000 magnet school students in a better quality facility. And this will also allow us for opportunities to share the spaces, extracurricular clubs, community school resources. Some of the questions that come up for us is around, well, how are the decisions being, you know, considered? How did you get to these decisions? I know I've talked a little bit about that, but I also wanted to make sure that I talked about the two major driving factors right? So per policy, like I referenced before, per policy, before any school closure can be recommended to the board, there has to be a comprehensive study. And so the comprehensive study also entailed community conversations and feedback from the community, in addition to looking at what I referenced before. How are students doing? How are we spending our money? How are our facilities? What's our transportation budget? All of those things. And the comprehensive study, by the way, showed us that we weren't being smart. We weren't being as smart as we can be with our resources. Remember, resources mean what? People, time, money. And then, the other driving force was the community input, right? And I know some of you, call the office and say, is there any way that you can disconnect me from getting your calls to invite us to the community conversations or whatever it is? We wanted to make sure that we had as much opportunity for input as possible. And then we had to look at this approach differently than in the past. I know that in the past, schools were closed, redesigned because of performance, right? For those of you that were here before, performance, academic achievement. You're not doing well, we're going to close you or we're going to reconfigure you, right? Or redesign you. That's how it happened in the past. Not how we were going to do it this time around. I struggled with that. I struggled with saying, right, so if we live in a choice world, and we know that some schools get more resources than others, how could we make a decision solely on achievement when we know that some schools don't have the adequate resources? Can't make a decision solely based on that. Certainly not based on performance and not based on those very narrow metrics. It's not just about the facility condition in isolation. It's not just about enrollment in isolation, right? All of these other factors came into play. And then, of course, the comprehensive rationale, right? The model of excellence, making sure that we aligned the recommendations that I made, aligned to the priorities that the community told us we had to have. Making sure that we took into consideration the number of families that would be impacted. We know that there's going to be transition, right? We know that. And so we had to look at, well, okay, how many families in a school versus families, the number of families in a school, the number of students in a school being shifted versus the number of families and students in another school. We looked at that as well. Availability of different seats, right? So if we moved a student or a grade configuration, making sure that we can have as many students and as many grades travel to the new school or their new setting together. Because we want to make sure that we also have staff travel and stay with our students in their new school. The level of building use we considered, the condition of the facilities, and then the resources that are available to the school based on the need. So it was not just a one criteria, one measure that was used, right? Many measures that were used. So I don't know if it would be more helpful for everyone for me to go through the frequently asked questions, the things that people keep asking all over again, or if we just kind of get into the question and answer. Question and answer. Go for it. Is there a mic in the back or? Go for it. Stan. No, I think Stan wants you to get the mic so that he can capture it on the video, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Hi.
I'm Jackie Bethia from Rawson.
Yes.
And I'm here speaking for some of our parents who wasn't able to make it. And we have, we have some concerns, quite a few, but these are the ones that they keep bugging me about mostly. We were told that Martin Luther King 6th through 8th graders will be coming to Rawson. One of the main issues is that Martin Luther King middle school students coming to Rawson Rawson is a STEAM school. Well, it was a STEAM school. I don't know what it is now. Every time I turn around, y'all change it. But, and our kids, our middle school kids, for the last 4 or 5 years, were progressing very well in the STEAM module. Now, we were told, like I say, I'm only talking about what we were told, so I don't know what's true yet, that the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders will no longer partake in the STEAM model. So when the Martin Luther King kids have not been, and teachers have not been trained under STEAM, and so what's going to happen with the Rawson kids? Now, one of the biggest concerns is that the Rawson parents believe that our kids are going to regress instead of progress. That's a big thing because we worked hard with those students over there, you know, regarding that. And another thing is we're concerned about staffing because the 6th, 7th, and 8th, our middle school kids have major support going on with them. There's a lot of issues, and we were told that the support that we have in at Rawson will no longer be able to support our middle school kids if they become Martin Luther King kids. We was told that, and also they wanted to know, it seems like we're doing Martin Luther King students or the school a favor by bringing them over to Rawson. And why do the Rawson kids have to become Martin Luther King kids, and Martin Luther King kids not become Rawson kids, where they could go and work up under the STEAM model and continue progressing along with our kids progressing?
So I'm not sure where this whole STEAM conversation came from, but from a program perspective, there is no intent to undo STEAM for the students that are there and the students that are going to go there. The thinking behind having the students become their own middle school is because we want to start getting them ready to be their own community, right? They're going to transition ultimately to their middle school. And so we felt that if we gave them the opportunity to start growing together now as a middle school, it would be better for them academically and socially. To your point around students regressing, because what's the conversation around the student regressing? Because they're going to have new students in there and because they're not going to get the added supports? Is that what the worry is?
Partly. Okay. It's more so, well, yes, both, but we're talking about the academic, components of that, because Martin Luther King students don't do the STEAM.
Yes.
So, what's going to happen, the Martin Luther King teachers are not trained under the STEAM thing. So, but if our Rawson students just automatically become Martin Luther King students, right, the training and what they worked hard for these past 4 or 5 years, it seemed like it's going to go out the window.
Yeah, no, so from a programmatic perspective, we're not saying that we're going to throw anything out of the window. What we're saying is that as a cohort, we want them to start living together as a middle school so that when they go and transition to their individual school, their middle school, they'll already have had an opportunity to build their community. With respect to the teachers, that's a commitment that we're making to the teachers around the STEAM, right? They need to learn. And one of the things that we're hoping for, right, that's an opportunity when, Rawson teachers, right, perhaps it's an opportunity for leadership. How can Rawson teachers and the administrators and then us as a central office support the Martin Luther King's teachers around supporting the students around STEAM?
So what about the support?
Yes.
One of the concerns is, for instance, a big concern is we have some students at Rawson that were safety transfers, and we have some safety transfers for Martin Luther King. Now they about to meet back up with each other.
Okay. So that's a great concern that you have, but those are things that we would look at individually, right? Those are cases that we want to know about and that our staff, right, has to consider. And with regard to the added supports, Let me make this clear. We are not saying that we are going to co-locate or merge schools and not have added supports. We're not saying, Rawson, we're going to send 200 kids there and figure it out. We would never say that. So I want to just make sure that you hear me say that we are committed to making sure that if there are additional social workers, clinicians, tutors, whatever it is, right, we have to look at the school now differently. We cannot look at Rawson in its current configuration. We have to now say, okay, now it's a different need that the school has. Which, by the way, when we transition, if there's a vote, that's what we have to think about the transition teams. What does the school need now? It's going to look differently. And we as a central office, as a district, are making that commitment. Because ideally, what we want to identify is the resources, right? We have an opportunity to reinvest in the programs and in our students. But we need to know all of these specific, the safety issues and all of that. Those are individual cases that we would need to handle, absolutely. But please don't, make sure that you communicate and let everyone know. We are not saying more kids with less resources. That's not what we're saying. Yes.
Hi, my name is Angela Frame. I'm here as a parent. Also, I'm an SGC member at Rawson, and I'm also an advocate.
Great.
So I've been to a few of these, and one of my concerns that I've never heard get addressed is specifically about your special ed children.
Yes.
And what is that? What if all of these moves and changes, how is they're going to be affected? What does it mean for them? Because I understand you're putting all students. However, I do advocate for children with special needs.
Yes.
And so my concern is, what is the plan for them?
Yes.
Also, and the information you put up on the screen regarding merging magnet schools into community schools.
Yes.
My concern is, while you put up opportunities that are going to be coming, you didn't address how is it that these students who are magnet school students getting a separate curriculum, separate books, separate teaching, and then you have your community school there as well, who might not be getting the same quality of services or teaching. So that may create some animosity between students and teachers as well. That's something to consider.
Yes.
Also, you're bringing in a whole district of school to another school who don't get along on the streets. So that's the other issue about the safety for Rawson in particular. I'm not sure about the other schools, but there is that concern of the safety of the students.
So I'll talk about the special education programming, and those are conversations that were still happening. We don't have the full answer for all of our special education programs. I know that we have to see where the board vote is going to go so that we can determine, right? So where are our ABA programs, going to go? All of
Rawson has quite a few already.
Yes, absolutely, yes. And so we're thinking through all of that. I mean, Oliver, I don't know if you want to kind of address the initial thinking around that, but there is some thinking that we've been doing around that.
So why is it never discussed, though?
Because they're not full.
Why is it not a part of your recommendations?
Because right now it depends on the board's vote, right?
Why was it never even included in the first place?
Because we have to look at whether or not, if we're going to have the middle school go there, then we have to think about space. We have to think about, well, maybe we want to have ABA programs somewhere else. Maybe we have to have ABA programs in the south, ABA programs in the north, right? It's not that we're saying we're not thinking about our special education students. That's not what we're saying at all.
You're not saying anything. That's the problem.
Well, you're asking me and I'm answering, right? So we're saying that we have to identify what the needs are in all of our schools that have special education programming.
So in relation to the specific situation at Rawson, there are a number of ABA classrooms there, and there have been some opportunities for their integration within the school community. However, with the move of additional middle school students from MLK, there are definite space constraints. And in terms of preserving the programming spaces for STEAM and the other resources that Rawson uses in the building, there'll be a need to consider whether there's still the capacity for as many classrooms. One reason it hasn't been discussed, because I know at the last community conversations, Dr. Sellers from Special Education pointed out that she's really eager to involve the voices of parents from those programs in this, and looking at the addresses and locations of those families to make a clear plan on where they go next. So the first step is for the board to make a decision around the larger blocks of programming, and then the next step will be to engage parents further, and special education will work on a design from that going forward.
Yes, you had another question around the magnet programming and the curriculum, and whether or not there would be the other component that would be not as high quality. So that's where this model of excellence and the design, right? We know that we didn't get to where we are overnight in terms of our students not performing at high levels. So yes, it's gonna take us some time, but we're saying that we wanna have the resources available to get all of our students. Magnet, if it's a co-location, right, that we allow the resources available for our staff. You talked about the instruction is not high quality, but I don't know if that's the word that you used, but the performance. And a theme. Yes.
There is higher quality magnets, like kids are going there, parents are sending them there, and not at the community school. So if you're going to merge them into one school, that's going to create some issues.
Okay, so merging into one school, but it doesn't mean that the theme is going to be shared across both, right? So I'll use the Weaver example, right? So we know that Kinsella Performing Arts is going to have that theme.
It's not about the theme.
Okay.
It's about the availability of what the magnet schools are getting and the community schools are getting. It's going to be two separate things, and it's going to create animosity.
So I will speak to, and actually I know Chris is here and she can speak to it from a curricular perspective. Even though a magnet school has a theme, we still have standards in terms of our content areas, right? Our math, our English, our social studies, and our science. That quality of teaching has to be the same in any school across the district. You're saying we're not there yet, and I'm saying I agree with you. That's why we need a model that is going to allow us to get there. And if we're saying that magnet schools have higher quality, which, right, there are also magnet schools that have areas of opportunities. I also want to say that, right? We have the data to show that not all of our magnet schools are performing at higher levels. Say again? Shared spaces, yes. I'll speak to shared spaces, but I think you're talking about the curricular delivery and the student performance. And so that's an opportunity that we have there. If we know that there's something working really, really well in a magnet, it's the opportunity that we can seize to say, okay, so where's the cross-sharing? Where can we use that as a best practice opportunity? And vice versa. We know that there's great programming in some of our neighborhood schools. So there's an opportunity there for us to leverage that resource. I know that Costas, you talked about shared spaces. So that's something that has to happen with the leadership, right? Making sure that the leadership talks about innovative ways. Perhaps there are enrichment opportunities that students can benefit from. Perhaps, right, we have to think about, well, who's going to get to the library and when, and how are we going to live in a shared space, right? And I know it's a lot for us to think about, a lot of the logistics. But it's unfortunately, right, it's the reality that we have in front of us now. And so it's not only going to take our school, it's certainly going to take central office in terms of supports, but it's also going to be, with the community, which gets to your other point around the culture and climate, if I heard you correctly, for students. And students from one school merging with others, which could potentially be from different neighborhoods. That's where I'm going to call on our community-based organizations, right, and our partners, to come and help us. If there are conflict resolutions, that we have to address, then we have to work through that. And right, so that's gonna be a collective effort. I'm not saying that we're not mindful of that, but I'm also saying that we cannot let that be the detractor, right? Now we have to figure out, how do we problem solve around that? How do we problem solve around a culture and climate issue, or a potential bigger problem, right, around culture and climate? I know, I think it was here.
Hi there, Wendy Clark, Classical Magnet School.
Hi, Wendy.
One of my big concerns, kind of across the board from everything you've spoken about today, is, as a parent whose child attends the magnet school, you seem to, and I hear all the time, the haves and have-nots of magnet school versus our local Hartford schools. My concern is, we are not fully seated. We're short about 200 students at Classical, and You know, and the K through 8 model that Hartford has was very difficult for a middle school through high school magnet school, because it's hard to grab the kids.
A 612, you mean?
Right. So it was difficult, and you know, the new pathways, I think, are great in terms of filling those middle school seats, which I think is wonderful. But, you know, I guess my concern is there's not a whole lot of talk about magnet, and my concern is you're going to push them to the back burner, and they're equally as important because, again, you do service not only those suburban kids, but those Hartford public school kids. And every time that we take a hit in population at our school, we take a hit in academic supports, we take a hit in all of those things. And I'm really concerned about the students at Classical and the quality of our programming that has been going downhill, frankly, because of the lack of students that we're able to bring in.
So I did hear that actually also at the last community conversations that we had. We had a dad there that spoke about the fact that in his middle program, he has seen over the years the resources, right, been pulled away, the extracurricular, the added supports, to the point where he says, you know, now I get it, right? I wouldn't have my child there because they don't have the access. When I set out to engage, one of the things that I did say is that we had to prioritize neighborhood schools. Not to say that magnet schools were not important, but because we had to stabilize, right? We still have many of our students that are not being serviced, and so we had to start somewhere. The other piece around the magnets is that, right, my voice is not the only voice when it comes to magnet schools, right? I know that we, and I'm gonna say I as the superintendent and representative of the district, right? We live within a larger system, within a larger magnet ecosystem. And so, you know, there are other people that need to come to the table. And I don't know if you all had an opportunity to either be present or watch the January 8th workshop that we did with the board, you know, and we had, you know, folks from the state, not only from construction, but we also had, you know, State Department of Education folks, the folks that, you know, really oversee the magnet and the choice component. And where we left it is we acknowledge the fact that we have schools that are non-compliant, and like, you know, we don't want to punish schools that are non-compliant, because as a district, we're saying we're investing money in recruitment, right? Because we know that there's a standard that we have to meet. A certain amount of students have to be from the suburbs, and from those students, a certain amount of students have to be either white or Asian, right, in order to meet that requirement. And so the schools do what they can, right? And still, they can't draw the students in. And so that creates a dilemma for us, because it's the same thing. You know, the slide that I shared around the number of students, that's what you're facing in your middle school now. And you're not gonna be able to feed the high school. And so this is not a way to say that, one, magnets don't matter, right? As you heard me earlier, students in magnet schools are our students. There are Hartford students in those schools. All right, so I want to clarify that, right? And I know it's hard for us to make a magnet versus neighborhood. It's easy to get stuck there. I'm trying to pull us away, but I'm trying to say we have to stabilize neighborhood schools and then set the opportunity for conversations with the state, with other magnet operators as well. So the intent is not to gloss over. The next step, as you know, the January 8th conversation with the board was, yes, superintendent, we want you to look into other alternatives and try to work with the schools and work with the state to try to figure it out, because there are access opportunities now that we don't have. I would love to have some of our students, neighborhood students, right, in your seats, which I hear it from non-compliant schools all the time. But if we do that, right, we know there are other implications. And we've heard it, and my responsibility as a superintendent was to present those to the board, because we know that the state, I see you looking at me, right? I know the state has invested resources in facilities for magnets, right? And so there's a responsibility that we have as a district, but we've tried. I don't even know that I answered your question, but
Well, I guess my concern, though, is are we talking a 3-year timeline before you start getting concerned about a school that is spectacular in classical
Yeah.
that is struggling because we lack resources and support?
Yeah. No, I actually want to start the conversations very soon. You know, I want to get to have, you know, when the other schools are going to have their transition and design teams, these are school-based teams that have to happen. That, you know, I envision is similar to the team that we have now with Weaver and Kinsella and Martin Luther King and Breakthrough. We have folks from the school, we have parents as part of it, we have the state officials there, we have our central office officials, right, as part of the team to try to come to some type of problem-solving solution. But it's not lost for us, and certainly is not lost for the board, because obviously one of the things that the board said was, well, superintendent, great, you have these priorities, great, you have a district model of excellence, but if you're talking about a district, what then? What are the implications for these recommendations for magnets? Because, right, there are schools as well. And so, you know, kudos to our board for, right, asking, one, the question, and then two, for allowing the opportunity for the dialogue to continue, and even to the state, right? Because the state, you know, they were there, they answered the questions, and they said, look, I know, we get it, but, you know, there's a stipulation. There are standards that exist, and so how do we attend to that and also attend to our neighborhood schools, which, by the way, for a long time, my opinion only, for a long time, right, have not been tended to as they probably should have, right? So I'm just gonna put it out there. So yes, no, the conversations will certainly continue, and I know that, you know, your principal and I have had conversations around that, right? So, because she said, okay, I'm ready to roll up the sleeves and, you know, think through ideas, and yeah, very open to figuring it out.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes.
Just another question too. You know, the schools that are affected or being affected, you know, right? Why isn't that the board or your office or whoever, no one ever comes in, you know, to the school and asks or let us know, you know, right? Or asks our parents, you know, opinions or whatever. We have a strong PTO, and nobody's ever contacted us and, you know, to say, well, we would like to talk with your parents, we would like to talk with your staff, you know, or whatever. We always finding out stuff after the fact. Right, because now considering, you know, like I say, I know y'all keep hearing me talking about Rawson and Martin Luther King, but this is the only way we can find out any answers. But no one has came over and, you know, said to us, like I said, we have our SGC and our PTO president here. And, you know, we're asking the question, did anybody contact y'all? Did anybody come ask y'all any kind of questions? Or, you know, what your concerns or what your thoughts about, I mean, you know, the decisions are being made by, you know, people that don't even come in our building. You know, so that's kind of, you know, that's kind of scary for the simple fact because, you know, when y'all finally do come, it's like y'all finding out stuff after the fact. I'm quite sure y'all would have loved to know what our parents every third Thursday is asking her, and asking me every day. You know, we have no question, you know, we have no kind of question, no kind of idea. It would be nice if somebody could come and speak, and, you know, speak to our parents and let them know that this is something that y'all been thinking about, you know, this is something that y'all want to make happen, but y'all can't make it happen without the parents. You know, right? And they need to know that they are a part, you know, of this. And right now, our parents feel that they're not a part of anything. They feel like that stuff is just being, you know, just dumped on them. I mean, and these are what I'm saying is what our parents, we meet every week, you know, right? And these are the things that, you know, they are saying and not knowing what to do.
Yeah,
So it would be nice if y'all could come talk to our parents. We'll set it up anytime y'all want it.
So that's, yes, that can happen, but I guess what, you know, the way that I would respond, there are several ways. We certainly have asked for people to come in and give us feedback, right? And there's been ample opportunity for that. And then the other piece is, and I know we have a few, I only see one administrator here, but, you know, with regard to building leadership, right? We have had at our monthly principal meetings, made sure that our principals have all of the information, that communicate with our families, that let our families know the opportunities that exist, whether it is at community conversations, at meetings, calling us, requesting meetings. I mean, those opportunities have been extended. We can certainly explore why, right, that has or has not been communicated, but it is not the intent to make anyone feel that they're not part of the process, right? And we heard what the community told us mattered. And then these are recommendations that are being made to the board, right? And this is why, for example, we're having this conversation here, so that you can, not only me, but we have board members here for a reason, right? Because they really want to hear what the community has to say. Certainly, reach out to Tamara, with regard to the invitation that we've made to the SGCs and to all of the PTOs to come to our sessions. And so I know those have been extended. But as an opportunity to engage further, absolutely, our office can certainly be there. I'll have Tamara certainly follow up. Any other questions, comments? I can go through, one more, Natalie. Miss Natalie. Oh, and Costas, yes.
Good evening to everyone present. My name is Natalie Langles, Chair of the SGC at Martin Luther King School. So there are a couple things that I'm very pleased about. Just, piggybacking off of what the my soon-to-be friends at Rawson are saying. We did have a lot of opportunities for parents to come out and voice their opinions. Nevertheless, as we go forward, and which you are quite aware of, there will be need for school-specific meetings. Absolutely. So I'm at MLK, we are definitely looking forward to ours as soon as possible. And I believe Rawson is also in the same position. And then I do certainly also look forward to a joint meeting. We got to start to create environments to really, grow these relationships. One of the things that I am not too pleased about is hearing as far as consolidations and co-locations are concerned. I'm hearing we over here, us, and they over there, and they're coming here, and we're going there. These are all our children, all right? And if you remember, when I started advocating for Martin Luther King as an elementary school. And when I heard the district-wide conversation and I saw the larger picture, which will benefit us all, I was willing to say, okay, Natalie, you got to do what's best for the general community. So it's not going to be an easy journey going forward, but I really do, I'm always optimistic when I speak. I'm just so hopeful that we could really pull together so that our district can be settled. I am anxious to have the January 23rd meeting and have the board vote. I am hoping that they're in support of what is happening, because this is just the beginning. The hard work is only just beginning. We got to get together, pull our ideas together, pull the resources together, and get our babies with higher academic performance, get them with improved character and deportment, and really have the District of Hartford be an example of what it could be, to really pull magnets and the public school system together. One more thing I will say very quickly. I understand that there's the local conversation and there's the broader conversation. As one who is advocating for equity, I will not say that I will be happy until every single child in the District of Hartford has equal access to the funding that is necessary. Okay, so we're talking magnets, we're talking public schools, neighborhood schools, but there's this bigger discussion, you know, and some great formula that I have no idea what it's about, of how the money trickles down. For me, there will be no true equity until each student has that equal financial footing to stand on. So I just want to throw that out there, you know, for future consideration. Thank you very much.
And while I'm not pushing back on that last comment, Natalie, my response is that until that bigger conversation, you know, and decision or formula is figured out, as a superintendent, I still have the responsibility to figure it out for our kids, like right now. Right? Because there's a choice, and board members, forgive me, you know, but I am your superintendent, right? And you have me here for a reason. You know, the urgency has been here, right? We know that. And the board has a choice. The board, and we all have a choice, by the way, not just the board. Let me get it right. We all have a choice to say, we're going to stay as is. That is an option for us. Clear an option. We have an option to say no consolidation, no closure, nothing. Let's stay as is. But we have to be okay. We have to be okay with what happens as a result of that. And one way that we can look to see if we're going to be okay is look at our consistent low performance. Now, I know that people have said, well, superintendent, what are you going to do differently? Well, I cannot answer what happened in the past. I'm here now, right? And I know I'm the face and the leader of the district. Hold me accountable. I have said that, right? Just like we said with the Office of the Child Advocate report. There are things that we will no longer tolerate. The same thing in terms of achievement in academics. And for us, for me, as a district, as a central office team, I am saying excellence for all. Not just in our teachers, right? That matters. Certainly for our leaders, for us as central office, but I'm going to pull us all into the conversation. Community-based organizations, some of you are here. Parents, right? We got to hold each other accountable. I get it, right? The kids are with us, right? And we certainly have accountability and responsibility. And we're going to step up. And if we're not, and you know that we're not, let us know. But that's a choice. I just want to remind us, the choice exists for all of us. And the choice certainly exists for the board to say, no, superintendent, we are not going to take your recommendation. That they have a choice. But we also have to be ready, right? To figure out, okay, then we have to, every year, $32 million deficit, $26 million deficit. How do we figure this out when we know that our needs continue to exist and increase in terms of students? So we can sit back and not figure it out. I can't do that. I will not do that. I will not continue with this narrative, this perception, right? Hartford can't get it together. That's one. I struggle with that one. The district can't get it together. Kids can't perform at high levels. No, we got to take control of what we can control. We can control our resources. We can control how we allocate what we have. We can control what we do with our facilities. We can control how we schedule a school so that teachers can have time to work and learn from each other. Like, those are things that we can control. So until, Miss Natalie, the state and what figures that out, right, I got to tend to our house. It's like we do at home, right? We know we can't continue not being able to pay all the bills, right? We got to figure things out. And we know we have to make hard decisions sometimes. And this is not to say that feelings, that I'm not valuing feelings, that's not it. My task was engage. Make sure that there is an engagement process that has voice to inform recommendations and a comprehensive study for a district-wide model, because the board said no more. Should we be making decisions that affect only one piece of the puzzle? We can't do it anymore like that. So there are choices, but we have to be okay, right, with the outcomes. I know you had to speak.
Thank you, Superintendent. My name is Costa Diamantis, and I am one of the faces of the state at the Office of School Construction Grants and Review under DAS. I happened to move from the location we had on Capitol Avenue on 465 to the beautiful building on Columbus Boulevard on the 15th floor. Nothing bothered me more than not seeing a consistency of the schools and the facilities that existed. In my first year, this full year after working with your superintendent, 9 months ago, we started a committee voluntarily within our office to look at the various schools throughout Hartford. In 9 months, it was roughly 20,000 miles of looking at schools on my car, at looking at schools throughout the state of Connecticut and in Hartford to see what we can and cannot do. From our perspective, the new Office of School Construction Grants under Melody Curry as our commissioner, and pleasure to see you, Representative, is the idea that magnet schools had a particular purpose, but they are a building. We look at it as a building. And then, of course, we all know there are chef magnet schools, and we know there are charter schools, and we know that charter schools were built to be incubators that eventually were supposed to pass on the programs to our local schools. And lo and behold, because they were marketing tools, those magnet schools were built with a great deal of money. Money that under the normal course of business, the regular schools, the Burns and the various schools in my community and others were not allowed to use because the standards for us were different. That is not acceptable under the Office of School Construction and Grants and Review any longer. The standard is for everybody. Whether it's a magnet building or it is a local neighborhood school building, the idea is that it's housing children that have specific needs, educational needs, to promote them academically in a global world, right? We know that every school needs a gym, every school may need labs, every school needs cafeterias, schools need, etc. Those are basic needs that every school should have. And in our humble opinion, mine at least, I don't think a magnet school should look any different than any other school. And they should all have the same opportunities. The wiring for good computer systems, the appropriate auditoriums. If there is a need based in a school for particular black box theater, there should be nothing off the table that we shouldn't be able to provide each and every school. Now, having said that, please keep this in mind. The state of Connecticut takes care of, along with their local partners, right, the local LEAs, over 101 million square feet of school space. 101 million square feet. If we had to replace the schools in the state of Connecticut, we need $36 billion to do that. The average cost of replacement for schools to keep up with that number is $1.4 billion in a year. We spend at the state of Connecticut almost $1 billion a year in our schools, which makes us short roughly $600 million a year if we were to keep pace. Now, that's assuming we still need 1,227 schools. When we look at each and every district, we take into account the capacity of all seats in a district. And I don't care if it's a magnet school, if it's a neighborhood school, if it's a charter school. I want to know how many seats are in that community, how many of those seats are vacant, why they're vacant, and what can we do to make sure that we fully utilize the spaces that are available. Credit to Commissioner Wenzel, along with the SDE team. They joined us in a partnership with Hartford to sit down starting 9 months ago and talk about what does consolidation look like, what buildings work and don't work. I like to think we're pretty good at it. I've been doing it a long time. And to look at those buildings. Now, look at folks, I get it. There are some schools that are near and dear to our hearts, the building, you know. We went to school there. I can tell you where I went to school in kindergarten. It was a sad day when that school got closed, but it had to get closed. It was time. Things moved on. Education took a different look. the new technology required a different building that school could never provide. Because it was a school that when you entered, you either had to go up or down. Guess what? You can't put pre-K there, right? Can't put K there. Kindergartners there, you need one floor. So there are certain things that buildings just aren't suitable for. There are some schools that need to go down. And we know what those are here. Our goal is to make sure that every school is an equal school for each child. Now, we don't get involved in the academics. That's for academicians. But the one thing we do know is as quickly as they change the idea of how to teach, buildings can't change that fast and change every day like that, based on a new way of teaching. So our charge to the superintendents, who are the head of the construction process for us, because they're going to deliver us an educational spec that says, here's the program in that school. Here's what everybody wants to teach in that school, what type of school it is, elementary, this, the theme, etc. Different themes have different needs. But for us at the end of the day, it's to conserve monies and use them appropriately. Hartford has 35% more schools than it needs. That's the reality. The other reality is, in the nature and the way that the district works, and all districts are different, your school gives out facility money to maintain it. Think about it now. If you had a home that cost you $100 million, you'd want to take care of it? No, right? I would think so. Because if you don't, it's gonna dwindle very quickly, won't it? Well, here we go. There are districts where we're building new schools that may have 8 or 9 schools and only have $500,000 to take care of those 8 or 9 schools, when in fact they need closer to $4 million. And listen, folks, we all know what happens when budgets go bad, right? First place they dip is in her budget, right? Because they think it's so fat, not realizing the number of people that are involved in the children. The second largest infrastructure in the United States after highways and bridges are schools. It's one place that your children spend than they do at your own house, right? So the idea is, I don't care what you call the building. You call it a magnet. You call it a chef magnet. Call it a charter. For me, it's a building, and we want to make sure that if it was my kid, if it's good enough for mine, it's good enough for yours, and it should be the other way around. So we're going to ensure that those buildings have equity across the board for the superintendent and all the teachers and administrators to provide a program. Oh, by the way, with special ed, near and dear to my heart. Let me suggest to you that when we reconfigure schools, we understand the need for special ed. We also understand that many districts are bringing their students back home from other programs because they'd rather have them in their district near homes. We recognize there's a certain amount of space that's required for those students because sometimes they're there with a nurse, paraprofessionals, and they could be 2 or 3 people. Districts used to be hurt by virtue of the space standard because the space standard does not account for those people, and districts would have to pay for the money for that space. It was called ineligible. We don't do that any longer. We recognize that if the state on the one hand is taking some money because there's shortfalls in dollars, then we need to assist you in another way. And we're not going to penalize you there, knowing that you want to bring a student home and you need more space. So we recognize the fact that special ed is something that's very important to bring them back, provide the resources, and importantly, provide the space that they need to be able to do the things that they need to do, as well as the various other activities that exist in the school. So we're well aware of that, and we are working to do that. So on the bad side, I go out and I visit the schools. And one of the things that I do is I visit the schools without telling anybody, because I don't want to be hustled, you see. So I have to see it for myself with my own eyes, to go to places that most people wouldn't take me because they don't want me to see it. So I go and I visit the schools and we look at it. We will eventually do a facilities index. We have made recommendations. We have worked closely with the district. You have great people working at the district. In your facilities folks and the assistants that the superintendent has, it's been wonderful working with the district. The only commitment I can tell you from the Office of School Construction Grant and the commissioner, who's allowed me to come out to these, and she knows I come to each and every one and sometimes talk a little bit too much, but I'm committed to the project, as is my commissioner, and I know as State Department of Education is, to make these buildings and these programs work. Unfortunately, folks, 7 to 10 of those buildings are going to get closed. They've got to, or you will not survive, and we can't survive to assist you. That's just the reality. We need space at schools to be at an 88% capacity. That's the reality, because the studies establish very clearly, as the superintendent indicated, that the buildings that are built the right size, the schools allow for the greater collaboration and for children to learn. And by the way, co-location, folks, don't be afraid of it. Embrace it, because if I'm going to build a lab for you, or I'm going to build space for you where you're going to do communications areas or TV technology or someplace, wouldn't you like to share the space? Rather than have the discussion of have and have-nots. That way, there are basic types of things that we need to build that people can share. And I recognize that SDE used to say, I'm sorry, if you're in this magnet program and you're in this magnet program, you're not supposed to cross paths. Well, if it's a lab and a science lab, why should I build two if we can share the one and take the extra money and put it into another program that they can share as well? Right? So, to credits to SDE, they are working with us to do those kinds of things, realigning and creating new educational specs so that we can do that. So that at the end of the day, there are no have-nots. At least as long as I'm here, that's my goal. So that's the best I can offer.
Any other questions, comments? Yes, in the back.
Thank you. Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Tracy Casey. I am a parent at Rawson. I'm also the PTO president over at Rawson. And I do understand about the whole consolidation piece, and I see and I know that it has to happen. I just have a question as a parent, because my daughter's been in Rawson since pre-K. She's now in the 6th grade. She'll be in the 7th grade next year. So I was not in my mindset at all of changing her school, or, you know, she was going to stay right where she's been nurtured and she's growing and she's learning. Not to say she will stop learning if she goes to another school, but my issue is, why did I not have a choice as to whether it's time to change her school? Because I didn't find out about this whole thing until right before the Christmas vacation. So in order for me to apply for her to go anywhere else, the deadline is coming soon, which is next month. And that is not where my mindset was at all, because I've been comfortable with her where she is. So not to say that I'm knocking any other school, I just wanted to be a parent to have a choice in the matter. You know what I mean? So right now, if I fill out an application for another school, she may not get picked because it's like maybe a month or whatever. I mean, far as the lottery type stuff. But that wasn't where my mindset was. So do we have choices? Like, can I say, well, I don't want her to go to Martin Luther King. Not that it's a bad school, but just me as a parent of having a choice.
Yes. So I know that I have some choice staff here that I know that I can let her address it, but the timing of your application has nothing to do with your chances. So I just wanted to say that, and then I'll turn it over to you. Do you have the mic? No.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Nancy Mendez. I do work for the Choice Office. Just to address those concerns, all families in Hartford have the choice to apply to, during the lottery, to any of the schools that are available. There are some restrictions to stay within your zone if you require or if you need the transportation services from our schools. We are present, we're available to come to the schools and help our families complete the application, explain the process. If they need to know information about each individual school, we are available to do that. We encourage all the families to visit the schools. Yes, during the day when school is happening, right? Those are the best times to go visit a school. And also, we encourage families to attend open houses, bring your child to spend a day at another school that you're interested in. And during this time, you could do both applications, the Hartford District School application and also the Magnet School application.
But the deadline, I mean, we still have, for the magnet school, we still have, what, February 28th. And so there's still time. I don't want you to think that because you've waited this far, that it's gonna change your chances.
But it's not even so much of me waiting this far or changing my chances.
Okay.
The whole point is I feel like I'm being forced to do something without, you know, any type of say-so. Like, if your daughter stays in this building, per se, as the gentleman said up there, she will then be a Martin Luther King student, regardless of, you know, any input from any of the parents, and they all feel the same way. I'm surprised some of them haven't showed up tonight. They were supposed to be here with me, but I'll talk to them
Your
about
voice,
that later.
one voice is a voice, so that matters, yeah.
Yeah, so that's, in a way, for me, I feel a little disrespected. Like, I'm being told, if your daughter stays in this building, she's going to be a Martin Luther King student. And she has thrived and been nurtured so much in the STEAM module, which Rawson has had within the last 3 years. And I'm afraid that if now taking her away from that in 7th grade, because I'm not sure what MLK's theme is, and I'm not knocking whatever it may be, I just don't want her to regress. I want her to continue to thrive with what she's already been doing for the last few years.
So just to address the programmatic piece, I know Dr. Carbone is here, and she can speak to like the middle school program design. Not that that's gonna change, right, how you're feeling, but I hear you wondering, right, like what's this gonna look like? And so if somebody can get the mic over to Dr. Carbone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The middle school model, especially the one that we're designing for the 4 proposed middle schools, will follow a middle school design, which is a team of 4 teachers, interdisciplinary group of individuals. I know that you mentioned the STEAM model. We will have a STEAM model continuing in all of our middle schools because math, science, engineering, technology is critical and also aligns to the NGSS, which is the national science standards that we will be adopting. In reference to the middle school in totality, a middle school should be designed to meet the developmental needs of an adolescent. And in our K-8s, we tend not to have the complement and the variety of interdisciplinary, interscholastic, and extracurricular offerings that our middle school should have to provide our adolescents with a wide range of different opportunities built within the school day so they can become, they can taste a variety of different math, science, home economics, technology and engineering, arts, music, and not necessarily a one-size-fits-all type of programming. Within a comprehensive middle school, students are allowed to choose courses that align to their interests. By having a more robust offering and having more students within a certain middle grade academy school, we'll be able to offer a more robust academic program as well as interest-based programming.
So, but in terms of choice, right, I want you to also know that there is choice. While I hear you, I want to validate what you're saying, that you feel like, well, I really don't have a choice because my choice would have been, right, let me know if I'm further interpreting, but I hear you say, well, my choice would have been to stay as is in the current configuration. And I hear you and I want to validate you, but at the same time, I have to balance that with, right, there is another urgency that we have while I'm not disregarding what you're saying. But I want to make sure that our staff is available to you in terms of what other opportunities are available to you. Mm-hmm.
Here we go again with some change. You know, our kids just keep not being consistent with stuff, and every time you turn around, it changes, and that bothers them. You know, that bothers them a lot. it's bothering me because I really don't know what to do either. I really don't. I love Rawson, I love Martin Luther King, I love them all. But I have a child that is about to become confused.
Yeah, so we, as a district, we have to now figure out, well, what is it that has allowed your child to succeed, right? What is it that has allowed your child to thrive? And what from there, we want to make sure that we have all of those conditions, opportunities available for them to continue to, right? I ask that we allow an opportunity to think through, well, you know, even if additional students are coming in, how do we ensure that we continue to provide the experience that your children have had, versus looking at it from the other angle, which is, well, now because new kids are going to come in, right, they're not going to have that same experience. Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? That's what we're trying to say. I mean, you know, this is going to be new to not just the Rawson students, to the Martin Luther King students too.
I hear you.
You know, we don't want them to think that one is better than the other.
Yes.
You know, right? And this is what we're going to have until probably the end of the, you know, stuff don't get right to the end of the school year. No, when August, when they walk in the door, they got to understand that they coming in as one.
Yes, so to that, right, when I talked about earlier around these transition teams, that's what we're gonna need, right? The minute this vote, if it happens, right, then we have to think about, okay, the school design teams, which are gonna look at, okay, so programmatically, right, how are we gonna ensure that all of the kids are gonna have access to this STEAM? That's programmatic design team. And then transition teams. What do we need to do from, right, March all the way to August to ensure that our students feel like they're part of a community, that parents have an opportunity to talk through things, right, and that teachers have the opportunity to say, okay, so help me understand theme, right, this STEAM theme. Help me understand how we as a middle school have to function now, right, because now, for the first time, some of our schools are going to have a true middle school design, a true middle school opportunities where, you know, in some of our schools, some of our students are not getting like science because we don't have enough teachers. Never mind art, never mind, right, that's fancy stuff in some of our schools. And I hate to put it that way. And it shouldn't be. But I'm talking about other essentials, like social studies. Right? Reading, math. So I hear you, but it's going to be up to us collectively. Yes, the district, we own this, right? But I also, you're saying students from one school and another school, and there's going to be conflict. Well, sometimes you all know that better than we do. That's why we need the teams to work together, the transition teams. And that's why, by the way, we need our community-based organizations here as well. So it's going to be a lot of, you know, there's a lot of work for us, and certainly the district, right, will own it, but we also know that we can't say that, you know, it can't be void of other voices. But we need everybody to step up right along with us. Any other? Yes.
Can you clarify the timing as to when the MLK Middle School is going to open?
Yes.
I think there's a confusion about that.
Oh, let me go back to, so there are two things that are happening, right? So we know that the MLK campus opens June 2020. What we are saying is that for next year, we begin to grow the middle school as a community. So that was a decision that we made because we thought, okay, so we know middle schoolers, right? Y'all, look, I've had one at home. They're just, they need a lot of support, right? They're always trying to figure out who they are and what they're, right? Their worries are very different, right? They're trying to figure out their identity, who they are, how they fit in, and then there's the learning piece, right? There's a lot that goes on in the mind, in the body, right, of a middle schooler. And so we have to program for that. And so we thought that, right, it would be best for the student and for the community to come together and start growing as a community so that by the time 2020 comes in, right, they have their identity as a middle school. I don't know if that answers your question. Yes.
Yeah, let me get to the phone.
Thank you. My name is Artie Hill. I'm the PTO president for Sport and Medical Sciences Academy. And I'm hearing the comments from some of the parents, and I certainly do understand how they may be feeling and the changes that are going on. And as a parent, I would like to say that it's really important for us to be models and to set the tone for any changes that may be happening for our students, and not to project what we may be feeling onto our children. Our children are very resilient. We're talking about moving from one school building to another. I moved my children here from Virginia. And they, one was about to enter 6th grade and the other one was going into 7th grade. So they were not only going to new buildings, they were coming to a new state. And they adjusted. And I believe that they adjusted because I helped them adjust. That I talked with them about, like, we came up here and we visited the different schools, and we talked about the opportunities and the new people we would meet. And perhaps that's my upbringing as a military child, but I'm all about new opportunities and new transitions and new places, and not being stagnant and not being in the same place and growing and learning. And if we couch our conversations around that and not become so attached to what used to be, I think that there will be challenges, but I also think that there are definitely opportunities. And I have to say that also, I moved from, personally, I went from one high school into a whole different high school going into my junior year. Ideally, is that when you want to leave the people that you thought you were going to be graduating with? No. And I said to my parents, may I stay here, please, and graduate with my friends? And they were like, no. And totally, I understand that as a parent now, that of course I would not let my only child stay, without me. But to this day, I go to 2 reunions. I go to the school that I would have graduated from. I stayed in touch with those people, and I go to the reunion that I graduated from. And I say all that to say, if your child has not said that they are worried about the changes, then don't introduce worry into their lives. I think that as these changes come about, as the conversations come about, as the vote comes, that is when you talk with the kids about the opportunities and the possibilities. And again, there may be challenges, but I think that sometimes as adults, we put our stuff into the kids that's not there. And I would just say we should try not to do that, and we should model how we want to make this change happen and make it as positive as possible, because they are looking to us for that understanding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Challenging time, clearly. Right? No? Yes. Yes.
Hi, my name is Kelly Santana. I'm a Parkville parent and PTO member. I just like to say that we all need to remember as a whole, going into the new vision that the superintendent has, that at the end of the day, she's focusing on our children, and we need to focus on the children, because the children's failure is everybody's failure. And right now, based on what's going on, they're not getting all the resources that they could have access to. So we should remember eliminate all the emotion and everything else and just focus on what's best for the children. And having more resources to give our kids more educational opportunities is what's best for the children.
But so to get there, right? To get there, the choices and the hard decisions have to be made, right? We know we can't stay, because if we do, we know what we have to say we're okay with. And I'm not okay. I'm not okay with the outcomes that we're having. And I will own what the district can own. I will own that. But I know that that's not the only issue, right? Challenge that we have. I get that. Absolutely.
Yes. I came from a model just like this. I lived in Illinois, I graduated in Illinois, and the model was just exactly like this.
Like which one?
The one that you're proposing to do, with the pathways from pre-K to 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, and then high school. And I came first, I lived in the city, and it was pre-K to 8th. Then I moved into the suburb where they had the model you're proposing. It was a really big change. But let me tell you, it was probably one of the best things my mom did because it afforded me more opportunities than the actual school pre-K to 8th did. And the reason why I'm saying that is because the schools are smaller, classes are not necessarily smaller, but they have arts, music, different science classes you could choose from, different math classes. If your kids are a little bit ahead than other kids, they could choose an advanced class versus other kids that are not. Special education classes as well are also sectioned off, or not sectioned off, but they're, you know, they have a curriculum for them as well. So I know parents are scared about this, but I think it's gonna be really good because all of those resources that all these kids are not getting, like art. Who doesn't have art anymore? I mean, that's ridiculous. I was looking the other day, my daughter is a 12th grader and she doesn't even know how to write in cursive. They don't even teach that anymore. Like, we gotta wait from all of that stuff. So I think that this is a good idea. I think it is a good proposal. And like I said, I mean, it's scary, but we're changing. The world is changing. Our kids are changing. Everything around us is changing. We have to be ready and we have to prepare our little ones and the ones that are going to college and are going to transition into high school. We gotta get them prepared. I'm sorry. I mean, that's just the world that we live in now.
Okay, so our staff is here. If you have any specific individual question, we can hang around for a little bit and answer any of your questions. I thank you for coming out. And again, board members are here. If you need their contact information, let us know so that you can share your concerns, suggestions, comments with them. Thank you.
Saludos, estoy orgullosa de ser su superintendente, la doctora Leslie Torres Rodríguez. Estoy dirigiendo el proceso crucial de reimaginar y reestructurar nuestro distrito escolar. Necesito que ustedes, todos ustedes, tengan una participación significativa en nuestro proceso. Estamos haciendo esta labor crucial para cumplir nuestro compromiso, garantizar mejores resultados para los estudiantes y un acceso equitativo a los recursos para todos y cada uno de nuestros estudiantes hermosos y competentes. Cuando hayamos completado este proceso juntos, tendremos en nuestras manos un distrito escolar más fuerte y más equitativo, diseñado para servir bien a todos los estudiantes y un plan construido por toda la comunidad para el beneficio de toda la comunidad. Nosotros en las escuelas públicas de Hartford estamos coordinando este proceso, pero ustedes, la comunidad, las familias, los estudiantes, los maestros y todos nuestros socios son las voces y las mentes que orientan este trabajo. Al compartir sus opiniones, ustedes ayudarán a crear nuestro modelo del distrito. Nuestro trabajo en conjunto, que se llevará a cabo durante los próximos meses en reuniones comunitarias con familias, socios y escuelas, culminará con la presentación de recomendaciones para modelos de excelencia del distrito. Estos modelos demostrarán diferentes maneras en que el distrito puede ser reimaginado, tomando en consideración la condición y viabilidad de nuestros vecindarios y garantizando el acceso continuo de oportunidades y servicios a nuestras familias y estudiantes. Para obtener más noticias sobre este proceso, visite nuestra página del web del distrito en el www.hartfordschools.org.